Hello and welcome to the Recovery Matters podcast from CCAR, the podcast where putting recovery first is always the goal. Here we present interviews, discussions, stories, and speeches to cultivate the understanding and acceptance of the power, hope, and healing of recovery from alcohol and other addictions. Here are your hosts, Phil and Sandy Valentine.
Phil, I'm going to see if you can get this right.
Oh, brother.
What is one of my favorite things along the shoreline that I have sometimes dragged you to find?
Lighthouses.
Exactly.
Right.
So I'm excited because we have someone who is smart enough, wise enough to have chosen a lighthouse as their symbol for the work they do.
Well, that's true. But do you know that if you follow on Instagram, #lighthouses, that you get lighthouses from all over the world, pics?
Do you have this much time on your life?
Well, you know, when you're doing that scroll thing, so once in a while I just zone out and scroll. But and I find a beautiful picture of a lighthouse, and I love to post it in my Instagram story.
I don't like that, though, because you haven't seen it. You should really only be posting ones that you took the picture
Whose
of.
rule is that?
Mine?
Well, that's your rule then, so you can post pictures only of the lighthouses you've seen. I will post lighthouses from around the world. Hey, Trey, how are you?
Phil, Sandy, good morning.
Hi.
So what we're talking about, we have Trey Laird here. And
Good, very good.
I know. That's a hard...
It's
can you say
British.
that
It's a little
fast?
hard.
Right?
Huh?
Scottish.
Scottish.
Yeah.
Scottish.
Yeah.
Trey
Should have said
Laird.
British.
And how did you come up with the lighthouse?
So I was sitting in a meeting, and a guy shared that in his mind, he was his recovery was either moving towards a drink or away from a drink, or towards the light or away from the light.
Yeah.
And I thought, lighthouse,
Wow.
you know, being that beacon of light. And that was it. You know, I sort of thought that it was an opportunity, and I wasn't even looking for a name at that point, but it, you know, came up a couple months later as I was talking to some other guys about, you know, starting this project, and that's when it came back into my head, that what he had said, moving towards the light or away from the light.
What's the thumbnail version of your project? Because we'll get into it in
Sure.
more detail, I'm sure.
So the lighthouse is sober living for men and women. We have two separate houses, gender specific, in New Canaan, Connecticut, and it's our own little recovery community.
Yeah.
And it came out of my own story, which was that when I was in treatment, my wife invited me not to move home, and I had nowhere to go.
Invited me not to
I
move
love
home.
that.
What? You invited me not to come back when I left for the Appalachian Trail.
For 30 days.
Oh,
Let's keep
okay.
it real.
All right.
So that's what we've been working on for 5.5 years.
I know. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool, too. Yeah, definitely cool. So we like to talk with our guests about their recovery story, learn a little bit about that. What's your earliest memory?
Throwing a ball around with my father, you know, at home in our where we lived, and I grew up. I was as a young kid in New Canaan, and so yeah, earliest
You were
memory.
born and raised in New Canaan?
Not born, but raised from kindergarten through 6th grade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this is
And born where?
Philadelphia.
Really?
Yeah, Philadelphia. Lived in New Jersey for a period of time. When I was born, my dad was in Vietnam. My mom lived with my dad's mom, so my Grammy, for the first 5 months until he returned, and then we lived in Summit, New Jersey for a while, and then moved to New Canaan. And so I just this past January moved back to New Canaan with my wife and little kids, and so it was. I mean, thinking 40 years after we moved away, I moved away, coming home, and I literally lived 2 houses down from where I lived as a little kid.
That's crazy.
That'd be like me moving back to Vernon Street.
Yeah.
Right.
But I've lived in Manchester for most of my life now. Yeah.
Yeah, so it feels like coming home.
Yeah.
And, New Canaan is home, and it's, it's where I got sober. Back in 2008, I was addicted to OxyContin. I was doing cocaine every day. I was drinking every day, holding down a job, working in the city on a trading desk, and, just dying slowly until I found myself at Silver Hill Hospital in New Canaan, and that's where the recovery journey started.
Right.
So now to be able to have and build and support the recovery community in New Canaan, which helped me immensely early on, is great. It's that's some higher power stuff. Moving the pieces around the chessboard. It certainly wasn't my plan at all.
So when you said early memory throwing a ball, was that a baseball?
Yep.
You remember that, huh?
Yep.
Were you
Yep.
a baseball player as a kid?
I was an athlete. I played tons of sports. Baseball was not what I excelled at.
What was your favorite, and what did you excel at?
My favorite was soccer.
Ooh.
I played a lot of soccer, but I excelled at swimming.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for a guy that loves big teams and the atmosphere of team sports, it was kind of a bummer to be a good swimmer because it's so isolating and so lonely. It's tough to get support from your teammates when you can't hear them screaming and yelling.
Mm-hmm.
And but that's what I was a good swimmer, and I went to college to swim. And,
What were your events?
100 butterfly.
Oh, I love watching the butterfly. We have swimmers in
Yeah, I know. You have swimmers and soccer players.
Yeah, we do. And Matthew was not at your level, but
He
just that you can move through the water with a butterfly it's such an athletic move to be able to do that.
I have no idea why I was good at it. I was, and the problem was that there is no 100 butterfly in college. It's 200.
Oh.
And so once I got to college, I was not nearly as good as I was in high school, and then there was that pull of the fraternity basement, and after 1 year, I quit. And it was probably one of the biggest regrets of my life to quit, to give up on college sports, because I was I identified as an athlete so much, and in a split second, it was gone, right? Like, I'm no longer an athlete.
Where'd you go to school?
To Dartmouth in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We just recently recorded a podcast about our collegiate experiences, and one of the parts that I left out was my freshman year, which my first semester, freshman, was my best semester. And there's still a lot of guilt and shame about that. But I walked on the UConn tennis team and made it.
Cool.
And actually played enough to letter my first season. And then I quit.
Yeah.
And you know where I quit? So I could go be the practice person for the girls' tennis team. So I did make some good decisions. No, you don't.
Priorities.
It was priorities.
Yeah.
But there was no pressure, and the girls' coach loved me because I could give them a real good game.
Sure.
And so I didn't have to show up every day either. So that was pretty cool.
Helpful, yeah. I quit the swim team, and I think I probably walked right into the fraternity basement, literally, it was across the street.
Well, Dartmouth was probably a really good swim team.
It was the worst in the Ivy League. It was the worst in Division. Yeah, so we were D1, but not competitive. And but even if we had been a very competitive team, I don't think I would have stayed, because I was no longer, the star.
Yeah.
I was down the bench. I was the third guy in the 200 fly, and it was.
Did they have a shorter version of the fly too?
Only in relays.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was 200 or nothing.
That's strange, I think, but.
So before we talk about the fraternity, which I definitely want to get to, what was it between, growing up? What was life like? What was your house like?
Yeah, and
family? Do you have siblings?
We've talked to a lot of people, and this is the first time I heard about Dad being in Vietnam. Did that influence or affect anything for you as a kid that you're aware of?
Not for me, but because my dad doesn't identify as a veteran, really. He went because he was, it was the draft, and it was the right thing to do, but he doesn't identify as a military guy. So that was never part of, what I knew him as. To your question, Sandy, we could do a whole separate podcast on my family, and I have 11 siblings. None of them, sorry, just one of them, my sister,
Wait.
from the same parents.
How many did you say?
11, I think.
You think?
Yeah, listen, I have to. I need a whiteboard. My father's been married 3 times. He's had 2 kids with each wife.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's been married twice. She's had 2 kids with each husband. Her second husband had 3 children, who are my stepbrothers and sisters. And
This is the Brady Bunch on steroids.
right, exactly. My mom and dad split up when I was 8, and so dad moved into Manhattan, and mom and my sister and I lived in a smaller house in New Canaan until she met a guy who lived in Sweden. And so, middle of 6th grade, I came home one day, and my mother told my sister and I, "Hey, great news! We're moving to Sweden." And I didn't think that was such great news.
I bet you did. Yeah. Great news! We're moving to Sweden.
Yeah. So we moved to Sweden in
So
the
you
middle
moved.
of 6th grade. Yeah.
You did.
Yep. And
Wow.
and moved in with my stepfather and his 3 kids, who were. My stepsister was a year older, another stepsister a year younger, and a stepbrother 3 years younger.
Mm-hmm.
My sister and I. So there's 5 kids all of a sudden. And part of the agreement with my dad was that my sister and I would fly back to Manhattan at least once every 2 months to see him. And
It's a big trip.
yeah. And so my sister is 3 years younger than me, so I was 12, she was 9, and we got very experienced with traveling internationally. And back and forth, which the whole that everything. What that did for me as a kid was made me realize that I was not in control of my own life. That I decisions were being made for me, that would affect me greatly, and it made me uncomfortable.
Wow.
It made me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
My sister and I went to a Swedish public school where no one, they taught English, but none of the kids spoke English.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was where my identification as an athlete kicked in, because I could hold my own on the soccer field with these Swedish boys, and they accepted me and embraced me because I actually made their team better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was part of that crew, and I learned the language very quickly, so I was probably fluent in Swedish in 3-4 months.
Wow.
Which happens as a kid. You just
Yeah.
throw yourself on the soccer field and into a classroom, and that's immersion, right? Real immersion. So I lived in Sweden for 18
So what
months.
position did you play?
Right wing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Give me the space out on the right side, and I can run fast, and
you're
I can
quick.
I can outrun people. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just cross the ball.
All right.
Yeah.
She always said that very quickly, but aren't any more right wings in soccer though.
I know.
Then you dated yourself
Yeah,
a little bit.
totally.
You'd probably be a right back now.
Yeah, exactly. So after 18 months, I moved to the city, to Manhattan, with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about another really huge cultural change. In Sweden, we lived in a small farm town, a population of 1,000. And so I moved to Manhattan to... yeah.
Population of 10 billion.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
And my father had, remarried, 2 more kids, so there's little babies in the house.
Mm-hmm.
I went to private school. I was
So your dad must have done really well business-wise, or
my dad was a Wall Street investment banker.
Yeah.
And
did well.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
He had multiple
sounds like
families,
it.
right? That he was
Yes,
supporting.
yes. So he was he did well. I will say that one of the moments in my life that has affected me greatly was when I was 16. My stepmother woke me up in the middle of the night and said, "We have to take your father to the hospital." And I remember we were living on West 11th in the Village, and St. Vincent's was a block up, and just my father was. I was literally, I was 16. He was, 6 feet, big guy, and so I was helping my stepmother walk him down to St. Vincent's Hospital, where they admitted him, and he eventually ended up spending, I think it was 30 or 60 days at Columbia Presbyterian. The diagnosis was manic depression. And so this was 1986. So, not a lot less was known about mental health and manic depression. We now know it as bipolar. But that was another event for me that was my awakening to mental illness. It was also another indication that I better figure out how to take care of myself, because my parents might not be there for me.
Wow.
Right?
Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about how it manifested in your dad and what you knew at the time. Why did you have to go to the hospital on this day? What happened?
So part of it was just the genetic, the gene, right? Again, he didn't know, but I had learned through conversations with his mother, my grandmother, that it had probably been there in my grandfather as well as his brother. So in my dad, he couldn't sleep. He was up at all hours. He was just drinking cranberry and soda. He didn't have any substance abuse issues, but he was manic as well as depressed. He was going through he had just started a new business. He'd broken out on his own, and it was also, right before the crash of '87. And so I didn't realize it obviously as a kid, but there was major financial strain, and panic on his part, that got him to a point where he was, had suicidal ideation, and
wow.
And so it was from that point on, and he certainly recovered and has recovered. I followed in his footsteps to Wall Street. Obviously, I wanted to be part of that culture, part of that, put a suit and tie on and go to work. I remember going to my dad's office, and he had his own office like this, but in the middle of the floor was this big glassed-in area with about 20, 30 people sitting in there. They looked like they were standing up, and they were yelling at each other. You couldn't hear anything because of the glass, but I was like, what's going on in there?
Like the movie.
Exactly. And my dad said, that's the trading desk. And I was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Did you?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it was appealing because you know what it looked like to me? It looked to me like a team. It looked to me like a group of people working towards a common goal. And my dad was in an office reading books and writing, and those were not two things I wanted to do. I wanted to be on the phone. I wanted to be yelling and screaming and then going out to the bar afterward. I didn't know that at the time, but yeah. So I followed in my dad's footsteps.
Well, did your sister follow you, or did she stay with your mom?
She followed.
Oh, okay.
So traumatic for her.
Yeah.
To leave mom in Sweden. Mom still lives in Sweden.
Does she?
Yeah. And we can,
and with the same husband.
Yeah, and two. She had two daughters with him, so I have two half sisters.
Yeah. And what did he do in Sweden, or what did they?
He was an entrepreneur. He
Really?
he had some restaurants. He had a catering business. He kind of did a lot of different things, but mostly on his own. And he was a big athlete as well. He was a volleyball player, tennis player, soccer player.
Wow.
So a lot of outdoor stuff. You would have liked it. You would like him.
I'd like Sweden, I think.
Yeah.
I'm Swedish.
I know you are.
In fact, it's interesting. He was a member and a leader of this club called the Friskporta Club, which means fresh sports, I guess. Friskporta. And they had a campsite up near Stockholm, outside Stockholm, where everybody would gather for midsummer, and then and that was like a gathering of maybe, I'm thinking 500 people, and then once a year they had a camp, right, where they would switch it around different places in the country, and that you would come and you would everybody would commune with each other and camp out in RVs or tents. And the whole week long was all about sports, and you would represent your region. So we were like, southeastern Sweden, and there would be northern Sweden, and Göteborg and Stockholm, and the common thread for this club was that nobody drank or did drugs. There was no substances, and that was sort of the theme. And I think, maybe I was too young to talk about it. I didn't remember there being any meetings about it there, but that was just, he didn't drink or do drugs, and that was just the way that this whole Frisport Club, carried.
Would they say they were in recovery, or is it just a cultural thing?
Cultural thing.
Oh,
yeah,
that's cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I actually
Straight edge again. No.
Yeah.
You know about straight edge?
No.
Well, I just learned it's this whole sober culture back.
Yeah, we had a kid. Well, he's an emergency department recovery coach that was talking about growing up straight edge, which was you were very aggressive about your sobriety with other people. So.
And punk music.
And they
went with the music
punk
culture.
music. They had like XXX was their. They got tattoos all over their body about being so. But anyway.
Yeah, interesting.
The Sweden straight edge is a lot more tame, I think, but it's pretty cool.
So when did you start? Did you start before you became an adult?
Start
Drinking, using drugs?
High school.
High school?
But more just, again, because if all the guys on the team were getting together and they were having beers, then I was going to be part of the team. We could have been playing checkers and I would have been doing that. Whatever it was, I just want to be part of the team.
Yeah.
I didn't view it as a problem. I could take it or leave it. If the guys weren't having beers, then I wouldn't either. But it was New York City in the 80s, and there was a lot of stuff happening around, and so it was more often than not that there was drugs or alcohol at the parties that we were, or the places that I was at.
Yeah. I'm fascinated. You said this being part of the team like several times, and so you have me thinking about what it means to me, and I don't think I've ever really explored how important that is to me. And maybe that one of the reasons I dove into coaching when my kids were, because I was part of a team. I was the coach, but I was still part of a team. And a lot of times here at CCAR they talk about this being a family, and I say, no. I always say, and I let them say if that's what they choose to do, but I prefer to say this is a team, because that has a stronger connotation for me, that you've joined a team, you're purposeful about a team, you've made a team, and we're all in this together. And I know you talk about your Lighthouse team in the same way. And what do you think that? And do you have that same connection to team?
No. So
what do you think it is about? Is it a male thing? Maybe, maybe not. But what is it? What is that? I can't think of the right word. But the
association with the team.
Yeah. Why is that so powerful for you, and I think for me as well? What is that?
I think for me, it's the idea that I don't have to be alone. That I have a crew, that I have a crew, right?
Yeah.
Like who am I gonna? Again, what my childhood, I don't want to overplay it, but there was times in my childhood where it became very apparent that I may not be taken care of, and I may not be supported. And my thought as a team, being a teammate and being a team member. Is that there's unconditional support.
Right.
I got your back.
Right.
How can I help you?
And that essence is what drives gang affiliation.
Sure.
It's the same thing. It's that I got your back.
Yep.
No matter what.
Yep. Yep.
Brothers in arms, if you will.
And so going into my fraternity in college was a big move, it was a very important institution in my life, because I left home. I was so excited to leave my home in New York City, get out of New York, get away from my family, and so I joined this fraternity. And yes, there were drugs and alcohol around, but what I really liked was that we were brothers. Mm-hmm. We were a fellowship of brothers
up in the New Hampshire woods.
Exactly, and
right next to the Appalachian Trail.
I made such great friends, and still have such good friends. From
I was going to ask you that. My dad was part of a fraternity at Lehigh, and he's 87, and he still knows guys.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to California in a month with 7 or 8 guys from my fraternity. All together, we enjoy each other's company.
What's the name of your fraternity?
Alpha Delta. So it was the original Animal House. The guy who wrote the screenplay Animal House was AD at Dartmouth.
Come on!
I swear to God.
Was he there when you were?
No, much older. He was like 68, 69 class.
Yeah.
But yes, we had a great big house, and I lived in the fraternity for a couple of years, and my team was all of the fraternity guys. After college, I wanted to go be on that trading desk.
Yeah,
and so I did. I went from pretty much right from Hanover to Manhattan to start work.
So tell us, what's a trading desk? What do you do there?
Sure. So when I started in 1993, it was, everybody's got a bunch of computer screens, a couple of different phones, lots of different phone lines. I can push this button and call that client. I can push that button and call that client. You're not dialing. It takes too much time, right? Mm-hmm. And it was exciting because, you're watching the market move. You've got TVs all over the place because world events are going to affect stock and bond prices, and you need to know as soon as possible what's happening.
So when you call a client, you're getting them to either buy or sell some stock?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Or bonds, or maybe they're calling you because they, say, hey, Trey, you told me, a half an hour ago that, you have another client that wants to buy this stock. Well, I could sell you some, and now you have a trade, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was,
And so how did you make your money?
Being the middleman, right?
Yeah, so you take a cut.
Commission.
Commission.
Exactly,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, let's not get into any illegal.
I'm not getting into anything illegal. I just wanted people to understand what was going on at a Wall Street trading desk.
Yeah,
I might not know.
As a young guy, I was just listening and watching and learning from the other, the senior traders, and I had to be there early. The boss told me to be there 6:30. I want you my first job, he said, I want you to go to, take the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, USA Today, all the major newspapers, and I want you to cut out any important articles that you think could be impactful to the market today and make a packet for all of the people on our desk of the important news articles, right? And put one on each person's desk. So I was very into the news and very into current events and I liked doing that. So I was there first, and that got harder as my addiction started to kick in because being there early, I was out late, and so getting there early was difficult, but I always was. Mm-hmm. Still have a passion for, the news, although the news today is not what the news was, in 1993. No. So I'm less focused on it, but I loved it. Loved it from day one. I loved the idea that there was money to be made while I'm talking and building relationships with clients and giving them good information and helping them, make money for their clients. What wasn't working for me was being in Manhattan, where I had access to, drugs and alcohol, and I was being urged. I saw that the most successful guys were the ones that were out with their clients all the time, and so that was the path that I took as well. But, I didn't have the off. At some point, I didn't have the off switch, and so it was a couple of years into work in the city where I woke up one morning and I realized it was the first morning ever that I'd missed work. That I didn't make work, and then I called my dad and I said, I think I need to get out of New York City. I didn't say I have a problem with drugs and alcohol, but he likely heard that or was watching that. And he said, maybe you should move to San Francisco and go to work at Hambrecht & Quist, which was a company he had worked for when I was younger. and he still knew some of the guys, and he said, I said, why San Francisco? He goes, well, because you'll have to be at work at like 4 a.m, and you'll have to go to bed much earlier, and you get out of work at 1, and the rhythm and the culture and the environment's probably a little different. And he was right. And so I did. I moved to San Francisco in '96.
Wow.
Alone? Like
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
But I met my first wife like 2 weeks before I left.
Oh.
I was in New York City. I was out with friends. I met her. I said, well, you're great. You're amazing. But I'm moving to San Francisco. And she's like, oh, well, it's too bad. Well, maybe we'll stay in touch. And then, she came to visit. And then she came to visit for longer. And then she moved out there. And then we got married.
Wow.
Yeah. So
even through all this, you talked about losing the off switch. Do you have any? It just kind of happened, right? You don't have any recollection of when that happened or when the dependence really kicked in?
Yeah, I don't. If I had to like identify a time period, it was then.
Yeah,
it was because in college, I was drinking and using, but always with other people and always in a group on a team, and there was no consequences.
When you're trading, would you consider that a team as well?
I do.
The guys on the floor,
Definitely.
on the floor you were with.
Mm-hmm.
Were you good?
I got good. Yeah, I mean, I did it for a long time, and Wall Street has a way of guys who aren't good don't
weeding
they don't, exactly.
Yeah.
I was also fortunate to work at really, really good companies where people wanted to do business with Hambrecht and Quist.
Mm-hmm.
People wanted to do business with Piper Jaffray. People wanted to do business with Lazard. There's tons of Wall Street firms that people do not want to do business with, and it's much harder. So I had the benefit of being on good teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
if you're playing second base for the Yanks,
It's
then
different.
Yeah, exactly.
Than playing for
Baltimore,
or the Red Sox.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
He's not a Red Sox fan.
I know we're Yankee fans.
Yeah,
He's not.
I am.
You're
Yankee fan.
He's a
okay.
Yankee
All right,
fan.
all right. Just
We're
checking.
just busting on the Red Sox.
Exactly.
Although,
So you're in San Francisco, and now you're married.
Married, yep. And listen, so here's the thing, right? People talk about geographics. You hear like, oh, you can't do a geographic. It worked for me for a while.
Right.
I was out there for 6 years, and I'd say for most of that time period, if not all of it, I did not have a problem with drugs and alcohol. I was going to bed early. I wasn't abstinent. I wasn't sober, but I wasn't. I didn't have any problems either with drugs and alcohol.
You're waking up for work.
Yeah. I was waking up for work, and that's where I got into golf, because I was getting out of work at like 1:30, and so every day I could go play golf because there was nothing to do. People weren't going to the bar, people weren't going. The client entertainment aspect of the job was more like, let's go play tennis, let's go for a hike, let's go, and which was great.
And that was because of the stock market was on East Coast time.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, so
So
we
just
opened at
to
6:30. We closed at 1.
Yeah.
And I could be in the car on the way to Tahoe, which was a 3-hour drive, by like 1:15, 1:20.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous. I loved San Francisco. After 9/11, my wife said, Trey, we have to move back to the East Coast immediately. And I was like, what are you talking about? She said, well, no one's ever going to fly on planes ever. And all of our family's back east. And, we had a young daughter, and I had left H&Q, started a hedge fund of my own. It was rocky, and I wasn't. I in my mind, I was like, I can do this from anywhere. I don't need to be here in San Francisco. What I had forgotten about was my problems with drugs and alcohol on the East Coast in that New York City environment. I didn't forget, but I didn't voice that opinion at the time when she said we need to move back. And so we moved back to.
So you just dropped this thing like you started your own hedge fund.
Yeah. Well, making money in that first internet boom, trading stocks was so freaking easy.
Yeah.
And so I said, why do I need to work for a company? I can just do this myself.
Wow. But that's
It was
impressive.
but it was also very
Kind of.
stupid and young. I was 29 years old, thinking that I had figured
Bravado.
out exactly.
I can do this.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I started a hedge fund and shut it down within 20 months. In that time period, the NASDAQ was down 80%.
Wow.
So
Not good timing either.
no, unless you're a short seller,
Right.
which I wasn't. So it didn't go well, but it fortunately ended quickly. And in that time period, we moved to Darien, and I got a job with Piper Jaffray in the city. And the thing about, though, this is I tell this part of my story, is that within a couple of months of going back into the city for work and being in Manhattan, the idea popped into my head. Is I wonder if some of those guys that I used to call and get things from are still have the same phone numbers, right? Mm-hmm. And they did. They're like, I haven't heard from you in 6 years. How you been? Yeah, let's meet.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't facing the gutter on day one, but it was the start of a trend. And then
if it was a movie and you make that call, the people in the audience would be going, "Don't do
it!"
Exactly.
Don't do it. And then the week after Christmas in 2002, my son Teddy was born in November of 2002, and it was a month afterwards, and I had this terrible pain in my stomach, and I presumed it was related to drinking and drugging, but I wasn't sure, and it just wasn't going away, and I ended up driving myself to the hospital in the middle of the night, down to Stanford Hospital. And within a couple hours, I was on the operating table having my appendix removed. Ugh. And so, no problem. People have their appendix removed all the time. But it was the first time I was given opiate pain medication. And I sat there in that bed recovering, saying, yeah, I want more of that. I want more of that. I want more of that. And then, they gave me 60 or 90 pills to take home with me and refills. And, from that day that I had surgery until the day 6 years later that I went to treatment, I never missed a day of taking opiate pain medication.
Wow.
So that was that in before or during the whole opiate boom?
Before.
Just before.
Yeah.
But even then, to prescribe 60, 90 pills for
we now know it's ridiculous. Yeah,
right. But it was state of the art then.
Right.
That was best practice.
My brother passed away from melanoma, and he was treated by the VA. And when we went to clean out his apartment, the bottles of Oxy, and he wouldn't take it. So there was 10 huge bottles. There must have been 300 pills in each bottle.
Yep.
My sister wanted to save them. I'm like, we're not saving them.
No. You better be careful where you get rid of them.
I wanted to sell them.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
You're too chicken.
I know.
You'd sweat through all your clothes trying to sell some drugs.
So that was the start of an opiate addiction, and
over appendicitis.
Yep.
Well, how do you feel about that today? About
my opinion is, I wouldn't be I wouldn't be sitting here with you guys today if that hadn't happened.
But about I'm looking for a comment about the system that would prescribe that many pills for that kind of thing.
Yeah, listen, it's disgusting, and it's so sad. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be the person to change it. That's not my mission. So, yeah.
But you're more than willing to tell your story about how you got addicted.
Oh, yeah.
So that is helping to change the system a little bit.
If somebody's listening today and they get having a prescription after a surgery, you might need one or two pills. Right. I've had surgeries in recovery where I take opiate pain medication for about a day or two. Knee surgery,
We have too. We both have.
Yeah, right. And there comes, and I'm married to a woman who's in recovery, and she's been the dispenser of my medication, and it comes
for each other.
Right, exactly. And it comes to that. You get to that point where you say, okay, I know I can get away with saying I need one, But that's where you're going to cross over into
and you know it in your head.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there was a time when I was in cancer treatment, and I was sitting on the couch sobbing, and she came in and go, "Did you take your medication today?" And I go, "No." And it was a tiny little OxyContin pill. They're so small, but they're so powerful.
Yeah.
So I popped it in my mouth, and I was like, 20 minutes later, I feel great. Let's go for a walk.
Yeah.
And that scared me.
Yeah.
Because it was so the change in my attitude was so dramatic. So I told my cancer doc that, and he's like, "Well, what do you expect? That's the euphoric effect of the narcotic medication." I go, "I know. That's what I'm telling you." And he had this blank look, like
he didn't know what you were talking about.
That was dangerous to me because the medication was doing exactly what it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And they talk often about opiates. The draw or the attraction is the euphoric effect, because Tylenol or aspirin or acetaminophen is just as effective as squelching pain.
Right.
But you add that euphoric effect. And so as you progress, were you still feeling euphoria over all this 6 years? Did you say 6 years?
6 years, yeah. I mean,
or is just kind of maintaining?
Yeah, I mean, here and there, right? I went from taking 10 milligrams a day to 200. So part of it was maintenance. I'm sure there was some euphoria somewhere along the way, but most of it was maintenance, and I didn't. Things were going well professionally.
Well, how did you get this medication?
On the street.
Did you?
Yeah. I mean, once I stopped doctor shopping, I kind of like wore out the people that for a couple of years that worked. But then eventually I met a guy who was a pharmaceutical sales guy. So he sold them to me right out of his trunk of his car, with the tinfoil on the top, and I wasn't worried about there being fentanyl in my opiates, put it that way. Nobody had I never heard the word fentanyl at that point. Right? This is 2003 to 2008.
I think it was kind of, they might have fentanyl patches for patients and things, but I don't think it was on the street or anything.
So I was kind of going along saying, yeah, this might be a problem, but I'll deal with it someday.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, someday.
Tomorrow. Right.
And one morning on the way to work on the train, I was nodding off. I'd taken some in the morning like I always did, and I had a vision, maybe a dream vision of my daughter, who was 8 at the time, Brooke. I had a vision of her being early 20s, young woman, talking to some of her friends and telling them that she'd never really gotten to know her father well because he had died at a young age. And I was in treatment 3 weeks later.
Wow. Love that.
Yeah, I heard that story before. It's powerful.
Yeah. So, it was... It was all coming to an end. I just didn't know it at that time, right? Like I was being pushed in that direction to make a change, and my
you still have the same job? You're still everything
same. I did the same thing. I changed firms a few times.
All right.
So yeah, things hadn't.
And you weren't do you think you were as effective or not as effective?
Well, unfortunately, I think I was as effective. Yeah, I think I was. I mean, the thing about trading is you can keep track. You can look at a number at the end of the day and you can say that's how much business I did.
Yeah.
And those numbers hadn't gone down.
Wow.
And by the way, I traded stocks for another 8 years in recovery.
So you were a functional.
Oh yeah.
At the time.
Sure.
How'd you tell your wife that you wanted to go to treatment, or did your wife?
She kicked me out. She. I mean, listen, our marriage was not going well, and I was not the husband that I wanted to be, and I was not the dad that I wanted to be to my little kids, and I was out late, and she eventually said, you got to get out of here. You got to go. And when she kicked me out, got my car. It was a Friday night. I drove into the city, met a guy, and then continued on down to my dad's house in New Jersey on the beach. And I got there probably 2:33 in the morning. Not, and he certainly wasn't expecting me, and I didn't want to wake him up. So I lay down on the porch, or screened-in porch outside. And around 5:30, when he gets up, he came down the stairs, and he probably looked out the front door and saw me there, and then came out. And that was when it was the first time I ever said I need help. I said, something's bad, something's wrong, and I'm sick. I need help. And just then, as my dad was giving me a big hug, which was meaningful because he never really gave me a big hug. He still today shakes hands. He's a handshaker. He's and just then the sun was coming up over my right shoulder, and I could start to feel the warmth of the sun, and the what I felt was everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to work out. You will be taken care of, which was again something that I had struggled to feel as a kid. I was in, so then from that moment to a week later, I was in treatment. That was the start of the recovery. Literally on that porch right then with that sun coming up, that was the start of the recovery.
Wow.
Right.
The light at the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, the light at the house. Gotcha.
So, I went to treatment, and I remember the doctor told me, intake doctor said, listen, it's a pretty simple diagnosis. You have the disease of addiction. Here's the bad news. There's no cure. You're going to have this for the rest of your life. Here's the good news. For someone in your position, you couldn't be in a better place. We've seen people like you for 80 years. We've been teaching and counseling people like yourself for a long, long time. We can give you all the tools that you need, but the most important thing you need to know is that when you leave here in 32 days, 33 days, whatever it is, you need to manage this disease on a daily basis because we're not going to cure you. We've never cured anybody. And for some reason I listened. For some reason that got, I to this day I remember. And I kind of dove in and was, had my ears open, my antenna up, my radar up. The most important thing that happened while I was in treatment was nothing that happened on the campus of that treatment center. It was, they took me to an AA meeting in New Canaan. And all of a sudden I walk into a meeting with 100 people, some of whom I knew. I knew that guy from the train. I knew this guy from the golf club. I knew that guy from my kid's soccer team. And I was like, wow. I didn't know much about AA.
There's a team.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't have any preconceived notions about AA. I didn't know what it was. I mean, I had heard of it, but I didn't, But when I sat down there and listened to people talk the way they talked, first about the stuff they were admitting about what they had done, my jaw dropped, right? But then talking about their feelings and how they went about their recovery, I was pretty locked in. I was so locked in that I was worried that I was joining a cult of some type. That that this was some type of scary cult that I was gonna, I had to be careful about, how I, as much as I was attracted to the language and to the recovery, I didn't want to be, hoodwinked, right? But that was the most important thing that happened. Every morning they drove us over to the meeting, then they drove us back, and the other thing was, the fellowship and the community that I felt in that house that I lived in for 33 days, and the fact that there was 12 or 13 other guys that had similar stories to me. I was like, wow, okay, so I'm not the only guy that was a screw up and had this problem, because I felt pretty alone on the trading desk, right? I felt like nobody's doing what I'm doing, and I'm not sure how I'm going to get out of it. Too, oh wow, there's all these other guys, and they have families, they have kids, they have jobs, they have, they're normal. They're normal people with the same problem that I have. And so that power of identification was huge for me early on. And the thing that I learned there was that, you gotta just have your guard up. You gotta stick with the winners. You gotta figure out, what works for you in your recovery and do it, right? Because nobody gets sober on the couch. And while I was there, again, my wife invited me not to move home. I went to my counselor. I said, I need to figure out where I'm going to live. She said, go live in a sober house. I said, that sounds great. Give me the phone number. And she goes, well, you should probably go to Florida or California. And I said, why would I do that? My job's here, my family's here. And she said, because there's nothing here for you. There's homeless shelters, there's halfway houses, but no place where you're going to identify and feel comfortable. So our recommendation is you go to Florida or California for 90 days and then come back. And I'm like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. And I didn't do that. I rented a house in New Canaan. I stayed close to Silver Hill and to that meeting that I had been introduced to. And what happened was, this was also the fall of 2008. So think, the peak of the financial crisis. So, I'm theoretically very worried about my job. I'm worried about my marriage, which ultimately ended quickly. And, I'm worried about my kids and how am I going to be a dad and how am I going to do all this stuff. And I went to meetings in New Canaan, and I said I work in the city, and the guy would come up to me and say, if you work in the city, you should go meet my buddy Tom. He goes to this meeting at that time, and I'd go, what do I have to lose, right? So I go meet Tom, and Tom's got good friends too, and then Tom says, you should meet Pete, and Pete knows two other buddies, and next thing I know, I've got this community of guys that don't drink and don't take drugs and that are happy about it, and that they're doing what I do, and it was a game changer. I think the most transformative time of my life was the day that I walked out of that treatment center to fast forward 90 days, and the people that I met in that time frame are to even today some of my favorite people in the world. The guys that taught me how to do life, how to do recovery, how to live, and be a good guy, not just not pick up a drink or a drug, but what's the program for life?
Right,
and
exactly.
I met most of those guys in my first 90 days. I got divorced. I made it through the financial crisis, and started being the dad I wanted to be, and getting back to things I love to do, like skiing and golfing and Yankee games. And I didn't love, and Tim Walsh, our friend Tim Walsh tells this great story about his recovery when he was like, I know I need to do this, and I love this message that I'm getting here in AA, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life in a church basement, so let's take it outside, right?
Yeah.
And I identify with that because my thought was like, I really want to go back to Yankee Stadium and watch my team, but that's been for the last couple of years been just a big bar for me. And I ended up going to my first game with a bunch of other guys in recovery. And today, that's still the people who I would choose to go with. Is do things I love to do with other people who are walking the same path, walking the same road, and. So that was early recovery for me, right? Like a bunch of meetings. I loved the fact that AA exists everywhere. I traveled a lot for work, West Coast, Europe, Florida, and everywhere I went, people were like, oh, call my friend Steve, go to a meeting with him. Call my friend Dan. And that for me was like, wow, I have teammates everywhere.
Yeah.
I have this organization that's going to support me wherever I'm at. And that was huge for me. And so AA's stayed a part of my life, obviously. But I listened to you. I mean, Phil Valentine didn't come on my radar until 2015. But your message and talk about recovery versus 12 steps resonates greatly with me, and because there's tons of different ways to get sober and to do this, and by the way, at year 4 or 5, I would have told you as an AA guy that if there's a guy that comes in here and he hangs around for a while and then he leaves, he's dead.
Right.
He's not. He's going to be on the street,
Right.
Yeah.
And I know today that's obviously not the case, And
That was always one of the interesting parts about 12 Steps is you would hear all the time that we've never heard anyone come back and say it got any better out there. And my whole, well, if they came back, why would they ever come back and say that it has?
Right.
Because it got better.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, and there's been many people now that we've seen that drift away from meetings, but even Bill Wilson himself said AA was a spiritual kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And then where you take your foundation is completely up to you. But the rooms are always there. If you want to go back, I don't go to hardly any meetings anymore, but it's not because I don't want to or wouldn't go or anti-AA. I love when I do go and I sit in the room, I just go,
yeah,
and everything just is off. That it's like I'm home.
Mm-hmm.
That these are my people. You're listening to the same things are still inspiring. Some people might irritate me a little more when they go off on their talking more about their sickness and their wellness, but
sure.
Hey, that's all part of it. It's okay,
I think for me, what I've seen now, 5 years into working with people in early recovery, is that the importance of AA is just the fact that it's always there, right? Mm-hmm. That there's meetings everywhere, that there's people getting together in the morning, at lunch, in the evening. And so, if you want to be around other people who are walking this path, it's the easiest way to find them.
You can choose your dose, too.
Right. Sure, exactly. 3 a day, 1 a day, 1 a week.
Yeah.
Right.
You choose your dose.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of times you hear other people in AA prescribe your dose for you. This is what you need to do, Trey. You're so bad you need to go to 5 meetings a day.
Right. Yeah. I remember when you came down to the Lighthouse 2 years ago and spoke with our community, and you told the story just about how, AA is the only organization or community where, you're going to have two people achieving the same goal and pointing the finger at each other saying, you did it wrong. You did it wrong.
Right.
Or something to that
No,
effect.
that was climbing the mountain and getting to the top, and one might have worked AA and one might have worked NA, and they're both in recovery, and they look at each other and say, you did it the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly.
You came up the mountain the wrong way.
Right.
But we do that a lot in recovery, and I'm very open to, especially, and Sandy works with the recovery community at the collegiate level, to hear how people maintain and sustain recovery. It's fascinating. They're coming up with ways that
Sure.
I was like, wow.
And important.
Yeah.
It's huge. Because, listen, I get a lot of phone calls from people that say, I need help. I know this isn't working for me. But don't tell me to go to AA because I'm not doing it. Give me anything else.
Yeah.
Right.
Give me anything else.
And what do you think, what is that whole anti-AA sentiment? What's that about, usually?
It's part stigma, and it's part, Bill White just wrote a piece recently that referenced the idea that, the identification of people being connected to a church is gone, when AA started in the 30s, I think 75% of Americans were members of a church. Mm-hmm. And today, I think the number is like 40%. Mm-hmm. And so there's less interest in being God-driven and higher power-driven. So I think that's a big reason why people are less interested in AA. And I still think that there's stigma around AA that I don't want to be in a circle with these chairs and So that's what that was. If I had to guess, that's why the appeal or the appeal of AA is.
So when you guys
weakened.
You were gonna say?
I was going to say, I just think the coolest thing is when you blend a bunch of things. That, it's your perfect blend.
Right.
Your tapestry of recovery.
Yes.
So when guys come to you or women come to the Lighthouse, are they expected to work a specific program of recovery?
No.
Okay.
So the rule is, if you're living with us in one of our sober living homes, you have to be... you can't drink and you can't take drugs that aren't prescribed to you. Mm-hmm. You certainly can take drugs that are prescribed to you. We're going to hold them for you, and we're going to oversee that. But you have to be working a self-directed program of recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a big tent, right? That's a big, big tent. And we've had people...
Well, my program of recovery includes cannabis.
Yeah, that you can do on a non-residential basis in our 365 coaching program.
Okay.
But not in the house.
Gotcha.
And in fact, so in our coaching program, we have clients, and this comes right out of your playbook. Like the coach says, what does recovery look like for you?
Yeah.
And how can I help you achieve that goal? Mm-hmm. And they might say, well, listen, my recovery goal is to be able to have a glass of wine with my wife on Saturday night at dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Let's go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And and we're off.
That's like heresy. You can't be saying that.
Well, again, 5 years ago, I would have told you the same thing. You're not sober, right? But if that's what that person's recovery goal is,
we'll see how it works too. I'm very curious. I'm very curious to see how that works.
That's the thing. If it doesn't work, you have at
options.
least open to other options.
Right, exactly.
Well, obviously, so your glass of wine on Saturday night hasn't worked out too well. What do you want to try next?
Or maybe it has, and that's I think that's the scarier thing for people. Is that, wow, you're telling me that you figured out a way to have one glass of wine? Yeah. Like, tell me about that. Tell me more about that.
Right, and for me, it's just to me, I'm not convinced that I could do that, and I don't want to toy with that idea because I think that's dangerous for me, but that might not be dangerous for the person we're talking to.
Correct. And,
right.
and it's all, and having that coach is you can't make these decisions in a vacuum by yourself, right? You need to have someone that you're talking this through with, that can be that mirror that you talk about, and can say, well, you said it worked out for you, but what about that fight that you got in with your family, the next morning? Was that related to the one glass of wine that you had or not?
Right.
And so as long as you're working with somebody else other than yourself, the exploration process can be helpful. For me, I'm like you. I'm not interested in exploring because it doesn't matter to me. Right? It doesn't. And in fact, I love my community, my team so much today that why would I do anything that would jeopardize me not being part of that team and part of that crew?
Well, yeah, and if I picked up today, I would probably, more than likely, put my CCAR team in jeopardy, or at least my relationship with the CCAR team. I wouldn't say I put them in jeopardy. Relationship with my family, relationship with everything I've built. So it's just not worth it to me. It's not worth it, and because I found other ways to, find joy. I don't need alcohol or drugs to party anymore. To find fun, or my sponsor talks about finding awe, A-W-E, every day in something. And I was sharing, we had a little leadership retreat yesterday that I was walking with a high school buddy. So I've known him for 45 years. We're walking in the woods, and it was after one of the big storms recently, and these acorns had fallen on the path, and they were bright, almost fluorescent green with green caps, and I was actually in awe of the color of these acorns that were on the path. And I showed him, look at the color. He goes, wow. And he was like, he was really excited too. So, it's just...
we all get our highs in different ways.
It's stupid little things, but
Phil has a spiritual connection with squirrels, so that's probably what drove that.
All kinds of things.
So we jumped pretty big from you. Like,
where do you want to go back to?
How did you go from the financial district to the Lighthouse?
So my job, from 2012 started getting less appealing, mostly because the company that I worked for sold the division that I worked for to a different company, and I showed up one day for work, and they go, you don't work here anymore, you work over there. Oh. And I go, I don't really want to work over there. I don't know those people. And they said, well, sorry, you don't work here anymore. You got to go work there. And so I did, but I had a bad attitude about it, and it was the sort of the last chapter for my financial career. And during that time period, a company opened up in New York City called Serenity, which billed themselves as high-end sober living for executives. And I was like, oh wow, that's interesting. And then I'd stayed close to the treatment center where I had gone, and I was volunteering over there and talking to some of the patients, and it seemed that there was a lot of them that were heading to Serenity. And so what it became apparent was that Serenity was filling that void, that gap that I needed and didn't have when I was leaving treatment. And so I watched this company go from one property in Chelsea to 6 properties all around Manhattan, men's houses, women's houses, in about 2 years. And I was like, wow, there's a business there, and there's a lot of people that need residential support and want it at a certain level, and I hadn't realized how big it was, and that's when my eyes were opened to the treatment world and the treatment as a business, right? Nonprofits, for-profits, and I started to dig in a little bit but by the way, I had a lot of time on my hands because trading used to be very active and yelling and screaming and 2 phones to your ear like you think of in the movies. To by 2012 we were all sitting on a row of desks just typing to our clients, right? So no one's talking to each other. It's like a library.
Really?
Yeah, totally. And not what I was into at all. Wow. And then I started looking at sober living. Because and trying to understand, the laws, how does this work? Can I do this? Do you need a permit? Do you need a license? Do you need what do you need? And the more I dug into it, the more I realized you don't need anything. Right, no. You can do this anywhere. And so then I said, I started having this idea. We should do a really cool, comfortable, sober living home in Fairfield County, Darien, New Canaan. And my thought was that everybody that was coming out of that treatment center where I went would need to come to us, or at least a bunch of them, would need to come to me. And then I got, finally got tapped on the shoulder in 2015, and they said, we don't need you here anymore. You can go home now. And so I wasn't expecting it, but I was relieved. And the next morning I got in the car, I drove over to that treatment center, I picked up a crew of guys that were patients there. I took them to that meeting that I had first gone to. And the guy in the front seat next to me, I can't remember his name, it was Mike, maybe it was Eric, he said, well, what's going on? I said, what's going on? And he said, well, I'm really nervous. And I said, what are you nervous about? He said, I'm leaving today. I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going home to Cleveland. And I said, so why are you nervous? He goes, I don't know anybody who's sober or in recovery back there. And he goes, I feel really comfortable here. I love this meeting. I love the people that I've met. And frankly, I don't really want to leave. And that was, I believe now, my higher power just saying, you got to do this. And so I circled up a couple other guys that I knew that had similar backgrounds, Jim Hodel, Tony Canary, and said, here's my idea. Let's do this. Mm-hmm. And we rented a house in Darien. It was, 8 bedrooms, 6 bedrooms, whatever it was. It was a big old house in Darien. And the idea was you come live with us. You go back to work. You start seeing your family. You have your car. You have your computer. It's not treatment. It's sober living. And we surround you with really good, talented, sober guys that can show you and help you and support you early on. And that was when you came on my radar, because the idea of having coaches working with our clients was, it's like, that's a great idea. Got to do that, So we sent all these early employees up to do the Recovery Coach Academy. And that's, we have clients that, have worked with a coach, for years. Wow. Because of, us sending our guys to you training them, and then, moving forward.
Perfecting their art of coaching.
Yeah. But early on, it was just like, let's get a great chef that makes a good dinner. We'll have a great, it'll be a comfortable, I wanted it to be a place where people walked in and looked around and said, yeah, I want to be here. Because if you don't, I mean, these are people in general that don't need to come live there. They can go rent an apartment on their own if their wives invite them not to move home. They can go live in one of their other 3 houses, right? But doing early recovery on your own, we've seen be really difficult, right? So to put yourself in a position where you can be part of a team has been helpful.
Yeah.
And then we've kind of just gone from there, where we've got I met Cindy Shaw. And she is an awesome coach and can help supervise and train our coaches and just sort of, be in charge of all the client care. And then we opened a women's house last year because we kept hearing that, women need your support just as much as guys do. And I said, that's great, but I can't run the women's house. And so we needed to have a women's team, and that came together as well. And our 365 program, which is our coaching program, which is embedded in the homes, but also we kept hearing from clients like, I want to do this when I leave here. And so we said, great, we can do that. And so now we have coaching clients in Long Island, in Manhattan, in Westchester, in Connecticut.
Cool.
And the ones that are close enough use the Lighthouse as their clubhouse, as their recovery community center, right? And they come over on Tuesday for a dinner and a speaker, or they come over on Wednesday for a men's group and a dinner, or Sunday for whatever.
I got a Tuesday coming up, don't I?
You're coming on Thursday. We're making a whole special event for you.
Okay.
Don't build up.
Thursday the 16th, Phil Valentine live at the Lighthouse.
Gotcha. Did you know that? No.
You're coming.
Am I?
Yeah. Oh, if you can
It's all
make
men.
it. No, we're doing co-ed.
She's got class on Thursday.
You got class.
Oh, God.
You do.
I know, that's disappointing.
So what are the plans for the Lighthouse? What do you got in the future?
We think that there's that our model, has applicability in other geographies, but it's really all about the people, right? It's really all about if you don't have the right people in Long Island or in Westchester, it's going to be a massive failure. So for I think that the idea, the longer term plan, is to continue to grow, continue to focus on the tri-state area, and build our residential homes that double as recovery clubhouses.
Yeah, I love it.
Right? So we have a resident that's there now, and he's only been there a couple weeks, and he said, Trey, the best thing about this place is all of the random guys that walk in that front door who don't live here. I'm not even sure who they are, but they are positive influences on this environment, on this community, and that. He goes, that is something that you didn't tell me about when you were telling me about this place. But he goes, from where I sit right now, that's been the most important aspect of this. And that's what we want to keep doing, right? But that's what we want to introduce guys who are new and women that are new to people that have been doing it for a long time, because we firmly believe in that peer-to-peer model, right? That peer-to-peer model. Like our clients want to learn from people that have been there and done that.
Sure.
Not from a professor.
Right.
The relationship with a clinician, and I don't know how to describe this verbally so I can get it. It's like this, right? The peer-to-peer model where we can talk and sit at even we're equals. It's just so much more impactful, we've found.
Yeah.
And the newcomer does just as much for the person in long-term recovery as the person in long-term recovery does for the newcomer.
Yes. That's more, in my mind, that's more 12-step based, of a 12-step idea, and we're super careful not to bill ourselves as a 12-step place. Because again, we want people to be open. What I tell a client that's a prospect that's asking me questions, and if they ask me, do I have to go to meetings? I say, no, you don't have to go to meetings. You don't have to go to meetings. I said, if you don't go to meetings, I say you'll be in the minority. I'd say 85%, 80, 90% of our clients do go to meetings, and they enjoy it. but you don't have to go to meetings, and it's not a requirement for membership.
Right.
Right?
To go to meetings.
So one more thing, we can't wrap without going into this. You've expanded your family.
Yes.
And I have the privilege of seeing some pictures of some really cute little ones.
Yeah. So, met a woman, and we got married, and we have two kids. Tucker's almost 5, and Madeline's 2, and my older ones, that 8-year-old. That 8-year-old girl is 21.
Gotcha.
And you're 13. And you're 13 years in recovery.
Yep. And Teddy's 18, and so it's.
So 2 in college this year for the first time.
Yes.
Teddy. Yeah.
Teddy's at Wake, Brooks at Middlebury, and Tucker and Madeline are in preschool.
Hey, we get that.
Yeah.
We get that. We've done that.
Our range is, what's Colleen?
We're 16 to almost 34.
Really?
That's our range.
We have an 18-year range. 34.
He did the first one without me.
Right, and then so we have from Josh just turned 27.
Yeah.
And Mary's 16, so we have 4 kids over 11 years roughly.
And 2 grandkids, so.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Families, it's an important topic. But I've had the privilege of being able to have, we've had approximately 250 clients at the Lighthouse in the last 5 years, and I get to know them, and I'm always super curious, like you guys are, about their family. Like, what was it like growing up, and what produced you? And I'm pretty cognizant of how, things I do and don't do affect my kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
We are too. But then I've also come to the conclusion the things we think were tragic errors on our part are easily dismissed, and then something you said offhand, they'll end up in counseling over when they're 30. So just do the best you can.
Right. Yeah,
Whatever happens, happens. All we can do is love. Our job is to love.
Our job is to love. Yeah, I like that.
As parents. That's all we can do. Love our children.
I see a lot of clients that come through that may have been over-supported, parented. And,
that's that love.
That can be a struggle. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I actually started following a Facebook group for parents of a particular college because our last one's about to go another year, and she's looking at schools and the anxiety of the parents over move-in.
Yeah.
And 2-3 weeks into move-in, and they're like, how do you bunk the beds? And they ran out of forks in the dining hall last night. And I'm like, I was getting anxiety. And I was like, folks, like, if you have a senior in high school right now, finish raising them.
Yeah, exactly.
Because when they get to college, like,
let them go.
If they can't figure out how to find a fork, then we've done something wrong.
I'm in some of those Facebook groups too, and I've had the same reaction.
Isn't it anxiety provoking just to see their anxiety?
It's upsetting. I try not to read too much of it because it's not going to end well for the kids.
No.
Well, Trey, thank you so much for taking the time, making the drive up to Hartford to sit in our little studio and share your story.
Thank you for having me.
Really remarkable.
Yeah, no. Thank you for having me, and thank you for being, for being as supportive and helpful as you guys have been. I'm not sure. There are people like yourself and Bill White in my life that, it's more from the reading that I do than the actual connection to one-on-one. But it's, it has shaped who I am today and what the Lighthouse is today.
Good.
Yeah. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You bet.